Welcome everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes to get started for those who are still in the middle of connecting. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being part of our community. We have a great topic to cover today, but first a few reminders. Please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the IM window. Be aware that any questions you post will be publicly visible. However, if you prefer, you can post your questions anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter them. We've had a large number of people registered for this webinar. We're thrilled to see such interest, but it means it may be impossible for us to respond to every single question in real time. We will do our best to get to as many as we can, and we have several dedicated people standing by on the call just to answer questions. But I wanted to provide an additional mechanism just in case we miss some. If you'll visit aka.ms/AIPQ&A, you'll see a post dedicated to webinar questions. We'll be reviewing the question transcript after this call, and we'll post further answers there. If you're listening to this after the fact as a recording, that's also a great place to ask a question, so feel free to post one there if you have it. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We'll post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/AIP recordings. If for some reason you don't have the rest of the series, you can find it at aka.ms/AIP webinar. We also just yesterday announced a Azure Advanced Threat Protection webinar series. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out at aka.ms/AATP webinar. So I posted that link there as well. While you're there, please join our community by visiting aka.ms/security community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss out on any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, requesting features, giving feedback, reviewing our product roadmaps, attending in-person events, or joining webinars like this. We believe the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. We have a very useful content for you today. This is part 5 of a 6-part webinar series on Azure Information Protection, or AIP for short. Throughout the series, we'll be walking you through all the major aspects of functionality, showing you how to deploy and configure each part. Today's focus will be on monitoring and analytics. I'd like to introduce you to our presenter and AIP expert. Kevin McInerney is a senior program manager on our AIP team and part of what we call our Get to Production group. He helps our customers deploy and configure AIP, so he has deep expertise in this topic. With that, I will hand it over to him. Kevin?
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome today. I appreciate everyone joining our series. Today we're going to be talking about understanding your sensitive information protection landscape. We're going to be looking at the monitoring that we have in Azure Information Protection for that purpose. And we're going to talk about where your sensitive data is, what kind of information types are contained inside of that data, whether it is protected, and how it is being used. This will help you understand which users are actually accessing your data in specific documents, if those documents contain credit card information, health data, PII, etc., and if the document has been upgraded, downgraded, and by which users. So today's session is going to be a hands-on demo where we're actually going to be going through some live demo data that I've populated in my tenant, and we're actually going to walk through the different aspects of the AIP analytics so that you can see exactly what is possible if you start doing this within your tenant. We'll talk through the various locations within the AIP analytics, and we will also discuss custom reports and the actual setup of those analytics. So starting off, we have our usage report. This report actually shows all of the label activity, protection activity, users and devices that are using AIP in your environment. It will allow you to actually monitor the applications that are being used for labeling. In this case, we show that we have some Office applications, the scanner. We also have ISVs like Adobe that will be reporting into this. And we can also see all of the different labels that have been assigned throughout this during the labeling activities by your users. So in here we can see the label distribution, which essentially shows how many labels are set on your various files. For in this case, we see we have 47.1% top secret. Obviously, this must be some sort of a nuclear power plant or something. We have 20% general, 15.9% highly confidential, etc. And so we can see that we have 85,000 labels set throughout the environment, of which 65,000 of those have protection on them. We have a very busy 5 users doing all of this. But normally this would show all of your user activity and the devices in your network, which allows you to actually show the usage of your applications or of AIP after deployment. In the past with ADRMS, you would go out and you would deploy it, and then you would just hope that your users were actually using it. Now that is no longer necessary. You can actually visualize that usage and be able to show your management that your users are actually using the devices, and you'll actually be able to see that they are labeling their documents throughout this. And that will help you to be able to tune how you set your recommendations and various other aspects of that. You can also create custom reports where you'd be able to go into the log analytics, and I'll show you how to do that later, where you can type in and run queries and export to CSV and other activities. So another thing that we can do is we can go into our activity logs. So in our activity logs, we can actually view all of our activity by specific users, by device, or by the label that has been set. This allows us to track label changes. We can actually track access of documents and see who has actually been opening specific documents. And see here we also have that this is Adobe PDF, and we can see that this, an ISV is reporting in directly to our activities log. We can see who specifically has been doing specific things. So if I wanted to, for instance, search for my admin user, we'll pretend this is any given user. We can filter and see exactly what has been going on. We can see that Defender ATP has been discovering the usage of that data. We can see that they've upgraded, they've created new labels on documents, they've downgraded labels, and we can actually click into these and see more information about those actions. We can also look in here and filter on any activities. So we can say in here we want to see people who have downgraded or removed labels, and we can filter specifically on that. And we can see all of the labels that have been downgraded and by whom they have been downgraded. Obviously, this Mavi person has been downgrading lots of labels. And we can actually alert on that using Azure Monitor or Azure Sentinel. We can also say we want to know who has downgraded labels or removed labels for confidential and highly confidential data. So we want to know who specifically has been downgrading our labels that were confidential, or more specifically, we can target that just at highly confidential. And apparently they were confidential labels. So, but this allows you to actually drill down and see exactly who has been downgrading your labels, and you can actually set up alerts on this so that you can protect against that and be proactive and see those things happening as opposed to just letting them happen. Additionally, we can see device risk. So we can see if we are in here and we say we want to see who has downgraded or removed labels on devices that are risky, we can use WDATP integration to actually select devices that are high and medium risk and actually filter on that to see any higher medium risk devices that have been downgrading labels. This could help us to identify if there are systems that are compromised that we can then go in and investigate to see if we have confidential data being downgraded and exfiltrated using WDATP integration with AIP. We can filter on specific applications. So if we come in here and say we want to filter on the AIP scanner, I want to see exactly what the AIP scanner has been doing with our labels. We can see that the AIP scanner has been going through and finding all of these labels, and we can start off with doing discovery. The AIP scanner is in two modes. You can have Discover mode, which is available for E3 P1 customers. This will allow you to go out and actually find what types of data are inside of the files that are throughout your network. So you can actually go out and send the AIP scanner out to your file servers and your SharePoint sites and have it just search and find and discover all of the information types that are in your files that are sitting out on those file shares. This is a good first step and one of the first pillars that we have in AIP of Discover, where you can go out and actually discover the type of data that is on your network. And then with the AIP P2 features, where you can actually enforce, you can set the, you can see here the activity of new label, and this is the AIP scanner going out and actually labeling these documents based upon the discovery of information that it had in here. And so we can see that there are things that are SSNs in this document, and so it was labeled appropriately as highly confidential. We can also look specifically for discovery of types of data. So if you are just doing the AIP scanner and you want to do discovery of all of your credit card numbers, so you've scanned all of your repositories and you now want to be able to show your management that you are at risk, then you can say, I want to see all of my files that have, I'm sorry, that's in the data discovery panel. So switching over to the data discovery panel, we can actually go in here and say, we want to see unprotected files that have information types of credit card number. So we want to see all of the different credit card numbers that are not protected. And we see here that we have 7.3 thousand files in these two repositories that have credit card numbers in them, but they are not protected. So we can click here and actually drill down into that and see the actual data and be able to identify with confidence that these are actual credit card numbers. Now, the information type matches is optional. That is not something that has to be in there. That is something that can be toggled on and off, and I'll show you all how to do that later. But it is a good thing to be able to identify if the data is accurately matching, and it's good for, at least during your POC period, to identify if that data is, if those matches are accurate. So continuing in the data discovery, if we reset this and come back in here, we can actually see here all of the different data types and the information types that were found and the amount of files. Now in my test tenant, I have already run the E5 and protected most of these files based upon the different conditions that I've set up in my tenant. But initially you would see something along the lines of this if you were just doing discovery, where you'll have 8,000 information types or sensitive information types found within 9,500 files. And then initially they would not be protected because you were only doing discovery, but then you could go through and actually protect those, and you would end up with something of this nature where all of them are protected, but more likely the 60–70% of the actual data that is sensitive, or more or less depending upon the type of business you're in, is actually protected going forward. So this allows you to answer the question, where is my sensitive data? What types of sensitive data do we have? We can actually find where all of our confidential and highly confidential data is. So we can filter down to just that type of data, and we can see exactly what repositories those are stored in. We can also see endpoints. So I can see that this system has 4 labeled and protected files. And we can also drill down directly into those endpoints and see what kinds of files there are on them. And here we have the WD-ATP integration. So if we had a system that was high risk, we could actually drill down and see exactly what documents are sitting on that high risk asset that have highly confidential data in them. And we could potentially take actions on that to be able to protect that data. We could also click here to go directly into the security center and be able to take actions on the endpoint, including blocking the user and other isolating the machine, so that you can help to disconnect that machine while you are recovering that data or protecting that data. And this is a very actionable and important step in being able to protect your data. We also have additional data types being added that are for discovery of credentials. So a lot of times you may go out and you may open up a Word document and type in your user credentials or your Azure strings or something because you're just storing them there, and then you accidentally save those and keep them on your desktop. Now we can actually, or you save them up into a file server, we can see those files using Azure strings to be able to actually identify that data and go out there and see where those are. I don't have that enabled in my tenant, as that is something that is very new, but that is something that is available and coming and will be ready for you to use. Another very powerful thing that we have is our recommendations blade. This is a new feature and it's currently in preview, but this actually shows you the different types of files that you have out there that are not protected by recommendations. Recommendations, as we've mentioned in some of our previous webinars, are a very good way to guide your users in properly protecting their documents. So once you've already gone out there and you've created your taxonomy and you've deployed all of your clients throughout your network, if you are able to actually, how do you get your users to protect things properly? So most likely, a majority of companies actually have a default label of something like general. That's what we have at Microsoft. But then you'll go out there and you'll create recommendations that will pop up whenever a user has sensitive data inside of their documents or emails. And so this recommendations blade actually allows you to guide you to create those recommendations for your users. So it basically tells us that we have 30,000 files detected out there containing credit card numbers, and we are not currently recommending that users set those as a specific type of protected file. So this new blade allows us to simply click on one of these and say, I don't necessarily care if there's a single credit card number in there, but if there's 5 credit card numbers in a file, I definitely want to say that we should have this at least set at confidential all employees. So this would limit your exposure, and there would be a high level of confidence that, if a file had 5 credit card numbers in it, it probably should be protected in some way. However, by setting this as a recommended label, we're not forcing the users to protect that file, because it is theoretically possible that 5 credit card numbers are their own personal credit card numbers, and they need to be able to share that with somebody, and it's not business data. However, giving them that recommendation at the top of their Office applications helps them to say, if it is something where a spreadsheet or a document where they have customer data in it, then they can very quickly and easily say, oh yeah, I forgot to label this as confidential. And they click that button at the top to say, set this label. And then that document is protected and your business is no longer at that risk. And so this is kind of a way to guide your users to get used to protecting their documents when they create them. And then you can go through and essentially do this for all of the recommended. There are actually about 20 in the various files that I scanned with my AIP scanner, but I've already set some of those in my different conditions. And so if I refresh here, then that credit card recommendation will go away because there's now a credit card condition set. But we can essentially go through and do this one time and set all of the different recommendations for our various data. So you see here, there's no longer the US credit card number. But then another thing that we can do is we can see where people are storing sensitive data. So we see here that there are several file repositories where people have been storing their sensitive information, and we can detect that from here and say, we see that there are file repositories that you are not scanning with the AIP scanner. So the AIP scanner now uses profiles, or will use, it's in the preview right now, but we'll be going GA very soon with the AIP scanner that uses profiles and the cloud UI. So we can now say, we see that users are storing their sensitive files at this one repository in your network, but you're not actually scanning that repository with an AIP scanner. You can now very easily add that repository to one of your AIP scanner profiles. And then you can set the profiles. I'll just accept the profile default here. But there are various different options that you could set depending upon where that file server is and how you want to protect that data. simply click save, and just like the other recommendation for the credit cards, that will no longer be listed there because we are now protecting that location for that data. And then the AIP scanner will hopefully automatically be running. It will see the new profile. It will go out and start protecting that repository. And apparently that takes a little bit further. These are all in preview, of course. So now we've covered our usage report, where we can see all of our different usage data. We covered activity logs, where you can drill down into more defined data and be able to see, data risk and the various information on where this is stored, the item name, the application, and the user. We've gone into data discovery, where we can actually see the breakdown of the different types of labels that are set and the information types that we have found throughout our repositories on our network. And we've looked at our recommendations, where we can see the various different data types and repositories that we can set recommendations on or add to our profiles. One additional thing that we can do is we can actually drill down and create our own analytics reports. So the analytics reports that we have showing here are all built on Azure Monitor and the Azure Log Analytics workspaces. So we have all of this data being fed into the workspace, but as you can see here, we have a lot of different rich data that we can use. And one of the things that you can do is you can actually go out to our reporting for Azure Information Protection documentation site, and we have a friendly schema that will actually allow you to create custom reports and queries. The actual table is this Information Protection Log CL, but we created a events function, which allows you to query this in a friendlier manner. And we list out all of the different columns that are available for use. And so you can actually go through here and find the different information that you are specifically interested in. And then here are some example queries that you can use. This language is KQL, or Kusto query language, and it's very easy, very high-level language to learn. And we can put these into a query and just paste this in here. And we can see here, we want to see within the last 31 days, labels that have been downgraded and count by activity and who has been doing that. So we can see that in the past 31 days, I've had one label downgrade, again with demo tenant. But we can also say, well, I want to know who specifically has been downgraded those things. And so we can copy that data and drop this directly into the query. And we can run and see here that this bad admin person has been downgrading users. Now, if it is admin downgrading, there's probably a good chance that it's okay. But here, essentially, we're seeing that it's where the activity is downgrade label, where the label before was confidential, and the label does not contain confidential afterwards. So this would be your highly confidential or your confidential labeled data, and then anything general, public, or no label. And it will show all of those per user. And if it were, multiple in the past 31 days, you could see if there were, one user that had hundreds of these, then it would show them all in the list and be able to identify the high-risk users. You can also use this to set alerts in Azure Monitor. You can create a specific alert rule where if this is triggered, or if a certain threshold, so if 100 downgrade in a specific amount of time, then you set an alert to where you can send off an alert to an admin or your security team to be able to investigate that and help you to protect that data. One of the other things you can do here is you can export this. So we can export this to a CSV, or we can export to Power BI and do additional queries and create additional reports to be able to show rich data. So you can make this as custom as you want using any of the different fields that we have in the events function listed on this site. Additionally, we recently created a blog. Rafael Dominguez on my team wrote a blog about creating richer reports, and he integrated the Azure AD login data. And so you can follow along with this and the examples in here to be able to use the sign-in logs from Azure AD, as well as the information protection events function to be able to get richer data and be able to actually see how to protect that data in your network. And so this is a great blog for you to take a look at, and we're going to be adding additional information on the AIP blog going forward. So now that we've talked about the different logs and how things are, one thing we do need to talk about is how to configure all of this. So if we're here in our Azure Information Protection, this does work with our current GA and preview clients, both AIP v1, the Unified Labeling Client, or AIP v2, the AIP Scanner, the MIP SDK 1.1 and above, and applications that use that like Adobe, WDATP on Windows 10 1809 and above. And in the future, we're also going to be integrating Microsoft Cloud App Security and Rights Management Services logs into this same location. So basically all you need to know is that if you're running the current GA 1.41 or above, or if you're running any of our previews, you should be able to start seeing this data flow into these locations. Now, most of this that we're seeing here is available via our E3 license. So with the E3 licensing or AIP P1 licensing, you will be able to see all of this usage report and activity logs, data discovery, recommendations. You'll be able to actually see the recommendations, but in order to actually make use of it, that is a P2 feature. So being able to actually deploy the recommendations to your users to be able to start helping to train them on how best to using those recommendations to protect your data. That is an AIP P2 feature, which is also included with EMS and M365 E5. So one of the other things that you'll have to do is you will have to configure analytics. And this does use an Azure subscription. So this is something that can cost money, depending upon how many users you have and your usage of it. The rule of thumb is that about 10,000 users in an organization can use anywhere between 2 and 20 gigs per month, depending upon if you're just using clients for basic protection, or if you're using like the AIP scanner and other doing more data intensive tasks. We figure that about 20 gigs a month is around $30 a month, and that's if you're going to be using the AIP scanner. Obviously, you'll want to test this in your own environment because it is very dependent upon what you are doing in your environment with your data. But creating this workspace is the first thing you'll have to do in order to get any of these reports. And you'll need to create this before you actually start deploying, because only data from the time that you create this workspace and configure it and on is when you will actually see this data start showing up in the reports. So to create a new workspace, you would simply click on that Create New Workspace, or you could do this directly through Log Analytics and just use an existing one. You do that by clicking on Link Existing and then selecting an existing workspace. For creating a new one, you would give it a globally unique name. This has to be unique against all of Azure. So you would want to basically be your organization. AIP Analytics usually works. You would choose your Azure subscription, and then you would either use an existing or create a new resource group. These don't have to be global across Azure. And make sure that you choose a location that is near where you are. because otherwise it will take longer for your data to actually show up. So typically keeping this co-located with your actual tenant location is a good idea. You choose your pricing tier. Keep in mind that most of the time you're going to be per GB, but it depends upon how you have that set up in your environment. There is a free tier, but that free tier only keeps the data for 7 days, which most organizations are going to want longer than 7 days of data for this so that they can actually get more utilization out of it and actually see the visualization of their data. Now I've already configured a log analytics workspace, so I'm going to cancel this. But here I have my AIP demo workspace, and I have enabled that for AIP analytics. And I've also checked the box here to enable deeper analytics into the sensitive data. This does result in the content matches showing up. So this is where I showed you that flyout panel in the activity log where it actually showed the real data. So depending upon where you are and what regulations you are dealing with, you do need to, you may want to disable this or not enable it, as it were. Additionally, if you do use this, make sure that you lock down that AIP analytics workspace appropriately to only users that have the need for that data or the rights to be able to view that data, because this is essentially making that data be in a location where other people could potentially get to it, and that puts you at some risk. So you do want to make sure that if you do enable this, that you have locked down that appropriately to only people that should be able to view that data. And most of the times we've seen customers using this for tuning of this service and making sure that everything is working the way they expect it to. There's more information here at this link on that. And that is about all we have for the Azure Log Analytics. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, can you speak a little bit, Kevin, to what's the scope of the monitoring? What scenarios will AIP see something, and in what cases is it not able to monitor it?
So in the cases that it's able to see that is when you have the AIP client deployed to your users. So the easiest way to ensure that you get all of your data is to make sure that you have the client deployed throughout your network. We will also be getting information back from the native integrated clients in the future. So once Office has the sensitivity toolbar built in, we will also be able to get that because that's from the MIP SDK. We get it from the Adobe clients, and essentially anything that reports in through the MIP SDK, we will see that activity as well. But also we see from the AIP scanner and other applications of that sort. In the future, we are going to be getting additional analytics from MCAS and from the Azure RMS logs that will allow us to see more information on activity, so the consumption of content, similar to what we can see in the Azure RMS PowerShell logs today. And that is something that we are currently working on and will be included in the future.
Great. We got a question here regarding log analytics workspaces. What about multi-site tenants? Does more than one site get used?
Multi-site tenants. So that is something that I'd have to get some clarification on. What specifically? So can I get a little bit more information on exactly what that question is for? I mean, you have a tenant that is located in multiple places throughout the world, or?
Brian, if you could respond and clarify that a little bit. In the meantime, we'll go on to another topic here while we're waiting for his response. You talked about integration with Windows Defender ATP. Can you speak a little bit to what other applications AIP is integrating with?
Sure. Windows Defender ATP is one of the main applications that we're integrating with because of the fact that they are directly integrated with the client, and they are going to be able to start doing endpoint DLP type activities in the future. There are going to be other third-party applications that are going to be integrating with our MIP SDK that will also be able to feed this data in. And we have multiple different ISVs that we're currently working with that we will be announcing in the future. I know there are several that I can't really speak to because we're under NDA at the moment, and this is a public webcast. But many different vendors are going to be starting to use the MIP SDK like Adobe does today to be able to report in the analytics to this. And there are going to be, and we are going to make this cross-platform as well, because I know that Microsoft Defender is going to be available on other platforms for that purpose.
Great, thank you. Can someone scan just their SharePoint Online and OneDrive for business repositories without using an on-premise scanner?
So SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business repositories are scanned via Microsoft Cloud App Security or via O365 DLP. Those things aren't currently being shown in our analytics, but that is something that we are looking at adding in the future, because we do want to get that single pane of glass full view of all of this. But eventually all of this will most likely be in the Microsoft Security Center, which will include the O365 DLP, the Azure Information Protection Analytics, and also MCAS all in one location. And that is obviously the dream. So.
Great, thank you. Can you speak a little bit to how we manage false positives in this monitoring?
So false positives are something that we are definitely working on, and we are going to be improving dramatically on when we move to the MIP-based AIP scanner, or I guess it would just be the MIP scanner at that point. We are introducing more rich capabilities based upon the O365 DLP conditions. So O365 DLP conditions in Office 365 currently allow you to use things like exact data match and data dictionaries and weighting of conditions, as well as and/or type queries. And that type of ability will be available once we move the scanner to the MIP framework.
Okay, fantastic. Can you speak a little bit more to how to create some of these reports? For example, was the usage report a template? Is that something you have to go in and custom create?
So all of these reports that we're looking at right now are actually built into AIP today. They are in preview, but they are all lit up in all of the tenants. So if you go into your AIP tenant and you configure your analytics, as I showed earlier, then any of your clients that are the current GA or above are going to start feeding this information in. There's nothing that you have to configure in that. You will just start seeing labeling data and usage data automatically.
Excellent. I'm going to give folks a last call here for any further questions. While we do that, I'm going to post some of these links here because I know a lot of people aren't able to join for the first 5 minutes as they're getting off back-to-back meetings, so they may have missed these links that I published. If you're looking for the recordings and slide decks for this, you can find them here at aka.ms/AIP recordings. If for some reason you don't have the rest of the series, you can find that at aka.ms/AIP webinar. Likewise, we just created a new webinar for Azure Advanced Threat Protection if you're interested in that product as well. So you can find that one at aka.ms/AATP webinar. So please join us there. If we missed your question somehow, or if you're listening to this as a recording after the fact and want to ask a question, you can go to our Q&A overflow, which is at aka.ms/AIP Q&A. And all of that, of course, is based on our community, which we would love to have you join. And that is aka.ms/security community. And we list there the groups on our tech community site for all of our various security related products. Try and make it as easy as possible for you to see everything that's going on from a security perspective. Had a couple other questions roll in here, so let's look at those. We have, this one's a follow-up from Brian about the site question. He says, we have users around the world. The main tenant site will be in the US. Some users will use Azure sites that are in their countries due to the data privacy localization laws. Will this affect the site that monitoring data is being sent to by those user devices?
So currently we have the ability to actually disable monitoring on specific locales depending upon regulations as necessary. But by default, the analytics are sent to wherever you tell the analytics to go to based upon the workspace you create. So if you create a new workspace, that workspace is where the analytics for your tenant are going to store that information. So Microsoft also has, worldwide users, and so, but our analytics are sent to wherever that workspace that we created is located. Now, as I said, for specific regulations, GDPR, other things of that nature, there are ways to actually block the data from being collected from specific locations, and you can also do that manually at the clients.
Great. Can you see reporting on Office 365 message encryption mails?
So we do not currently get full information here on O365 message encryption mails. That is actually something that you can find in the Microsoft Security Portal, so Security and Compliance Center. You can actually find information on Office message encryption activity within that protection that Microsoft's on.
Okay, excellent. Is there a way to estimate or pattern the average size of data AIP would have in log analytics?
Unfortunately, because of the fact that that is very specific to the user environment, we can provide general guidance, but we can't guarantee anything. That is very custom per environment, and what we do recommend is that you test it within your environment to see over the course of a month how much your users are using the service after deployment, and that would allow you to be able to see, as I said, the average users, if you're not doing AIP scanner, you're probably still looking at less than $30 a month, and then you can find out exactly what you're looking at. A large tenant with 100,000 users, we estimate there will probably be a couple of $1,000s a year, but for the visibility that this gives, most companies with that type of size of users don't bat an eye because of the fact that this gives an amazing amount of rich data that allows you to help to get visibility to and potentially protect your sensitive data.
Great, thank you. Is there any delay for the clients to report to the analytics store? This user reports that it looks like they're missing events.
It does take some time for the events to report in, and I've seen this be anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes. Typically, you should not see much more delay than that. But again, it does depend upon where your users are versus where the analytics workspace is. So if you have users in China and your workspace is in central US or East US, then you may see additional lag in that reporting of that data.
Okay, great. And I think with that, I think we've answered everybody's questions that I've seen that have come in. I want to remind people, if you do have, say, a more complex question you want to ask that where you may need to post a screenshot or something that doesn't really fit with the format of the IM window here, feel free to do that on our security community at the link that I posted earlier. I want to thank Rafael and Enrique and Shuba for answering questions, and of course, Kevin for a fascinating presentation. And most of all, I want to thank all of you who have joined us today and for being part of our community. So thank you, everyone, and we hope we see you for the final session in this series a week from today.